This is TWiT.
I don't know that I expected for a week to have like Twitter in the news, not just on one story, but so many different directions.
It was
it's like
boom, 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 boom,
everything
boom. Twitter,
under the sun.
Twitter was popping, and not just like the normal way that it pops,
Yeah.
but like news about Twitter was popping.
Yes, indeed. So let's talk all about it. Twitter, as we just said, big in the news this week. In some ways, the conversation has been somewhat predictable, right? This isn't the first time that we've heard about a possible edit function coming to Twitter. That's been big news this week. In other ways, very unpredictable. Who would have guessed Elon Musk buying nearly a 10% stake in the company, joining the board, although that seems to be kind of in flux at the moment. But anyways, we've got a lot to discuss. So today we have Kevin Marks, open web advocate and co-founder of Microformats, joining this show. It's good to have you here, Kevin. Thank you.
It's nice to be here again. It's been a while.
Yeah,
nice to see you.
It is. It's good to see you too. And I should also mention you're going to be on This Week in Google next week as well. So you're getting a double dose of Kevin Marks over the course of the coming weeks. So thank you. And perfect timing, especially. You had actually kind of reached out initially because you had posted about all the things happening, and primarily about kind of this edit facility that's the conversation happening at Twitter right now. So let's start there. And I think this conversation, it's easy to think that we're going to go into edit button functionality, but it actually goes into different directions, which I think are even more compelling, at least at this point. You wrote on your site, kevinmarks.com, about the type of editing that's happening right now, not just an edit button, but changes that Twitter is making behind the scenes that's impacting embeds on other sites. Tell us a little bit about the API contract that Twitter has apparently broken very recently as a result.
So this is quite a subtle thing. The way Twitter embeds work is you copy the embed out of the top right corner of the tweet, and it gives you a block of HTML to put into your site. And that has a block quote and then the actual text of the tweet and the link, and then a strip link that calls Twitter's widgets.js, which when that runs, it looks for those block quotes with the Twitter tweet on, and then it inflates them to look like that does at the top there. So it basically inserts an iframe, puts in the Twitter logo and all the links. So it's basically saying this really is a tweet. Now before, as you can see, that second bit there in the yellow, without that script, it would look like this on my site. We're working on edit button, and it would look differently on everyone's site. It would look how a block quote looks on their site. So it would use the default styling. You could style it to look more tweet-like, but the point is it wouldn't have the Twitter logo, and it wouldn't have that presentation you get for the embedded ones. Now the thing that changed was that it used to be when you delete the tweet, that block quote stays there and they don't put the decoration in. But what they've done now is they've put in a blank tweet template when the tweet's deleted. And also they're actually removing the block quote text from the site. So if you write a long post with a bunch of quoted tweets in it and refer to them, then those quoted tweets disappear and you end up with blank spaces in the middle of your flow. So if you're doing the kind of journalism, like something like BuzzFeed, where they have lots of quoted tweets, so you're doing the kind of journalism where you're reporting on a conversation that happened partly on Twitter and partly elsewhere, all the tweets, if they've been deleted, will disappear and they'll turn into these white blobs. But also the text that you were quoting from them will also disappear. And so this means that effectively Twitter has now edited a lot of websites and a lot of news websites as well by removing those previously quoted tweets. So yeah, BuzzFeed is the obvious example because they do lots of stories that are, here are all the tweets about this. And if those tweets or those tweet accounts are subsequently deleted, then they end up with these white spaces in it. But a lot of news stories have been affected because President Trump's account was suspended, and therefore anything they were quoting from those was showing in that fallback way, and is now been removed from the site entirely, which can make quite a mess of a story. So it's a subtle thing in terms of how you think about it behaving, but it is affecting other people's websites and how they use these tweets.
I think what strikes me about this is that it seems like this is something that was merely discovered and not announced, and yet, which tells me that maybe Twitter either they wanted to pretend like nothing happened, or they truly believe that this wasn't a big deal. And it occurs to me that like so many articles have these embeds in them, and whether from a reader's perspective, I care less if I'm seeing the actual tweet with the like colorful Twitter embed in there. What I want is the context, and that seems really important. That seems like a very important major change for Twitter to make, and not make a whole lot of public knowledge about. I mean, you've been in contact with Twitter engineering about this. What are they saying about this behavior?
Well, so I noticed this about a week ago, the 30th, I think it was, because I was looking at one of my old posts for some reason, and I noticed that I had a post where I quoted some tweets, and then the response to them, and then the first two tweets in the thread got deleted because they were out of, the person realized they were out of order, but so the quotes were there. And I went back and looked at that post, and instead of those quotes, there were white blobs, which I thought was odd. And so I looked at it, and I posted a tweet atting in Twitter Eng to point this out. And I got one response from a Twitter PM saying that they're doing it to better respect when people have chosen to delete their tweets. And very soon we'll have better messaging that explains why the content is no longer available. And my DMs are open. So I responded to that in the thread, and I sent some DMs as well, but I haven't heard anything further. And in fact, Eleanor Harding hasn't tweeted since that tweet. So, maybe she's away or something. I don't know. But that's the communication I've had with them. And some of the other people who've reported on this have called Twitter about this and not had a direct response. So a week later, when they started talking about tweet editing, I wrote this post up to sort of give the examples and the details. Because the tricky thing is that when they first designed this post, they spent quite a bit of time thinking about it. Ben Ward, who implemented the feature, he's a microformats guy like me and works on the web, is of that era. And he thought a lot about how you quote things on other people's sites and how that should work. And the way he designed it is actually quite clever. Because the point is, the block quote is the official HTML way of citing somebody else. If you put a block quote in, then you're saying, I'm quoting this, and there's a standard way of marking that up. But then he looks for the ones that are labeled Twitter tweet and inflates them into this thing that says, this really is a tweet. Look, here's a Twitter logo on it. It looks like a tweet. It has all the buttons you would use to retweet and respond to it and so on. So that was a smart move. But he also thought about the case of when you delete the tweet. And he said at the time, what did he say? He said, this is quite a good one. The embed code is a block quote containing the tweet content. If it's deleted or 1,000 years in the future, the text remains. Mm-hmm. So he was thinking about longevity and the sort of structure of the web for that. And then what's happened is they've basically broken that contract. And they say this on the site where they talk about how the embed stuff works. They say that if the tweet is deleted, it will not display the fully rendered tweet. So they have broken the way the API works without announcing it. And I think obviously they were experimenting with it and trying it out, but I think this is a failed experiment. I think this is a bad idea. And part of it is that if they're trying to respect when people delete their tweets, I understand that, but that doesn't mean I think the not fleshing it out into a full tweet preserves that ambiguity, which is a little subtle. It's basically, I can create a block quote that says anything and attribute it to somebody, and my site could show that, and then people do this all the time. But if the tweet has gone, then Twitter won't be confirming that that's what it said. And I think that's the right level of ambiguity if someone deletes it. Whereas removing the text of the tweet from my side is overreaching there, because, as I say, it's part of a historic conversation. And the same thing will happen if you take your account private. Then the tweets will no longer show up, and so on. So the nuance is there for the different combinations, because some people take their accounts private or public at different points, and then the link through will disappear and the verification will disappear, and it'll come back if they make it public again. So it's a dynamic thing that makes sense as Twitter saying, yes, this really is still a public tweet. And I understand that Twitter are thinking more and better about how to deal with conversations on the site, and when people quote one another and respond to each other in different ways. And I think that's a good thing broadly. I think they've been in the past they've been a bit too extreme on the anyone going to say anything to anyone, it's your problem to deal with it, and they're working to improve that. I do welcome that, but I think it's overreach to change other people's sites, I would say especially news sites, but it's not just news sites. It's
everyone's.
Anyone who's quoting conversations or putting stuff up there.
And I mean, there is the argument that this never originated with us to begin with, right? Like it was always kind of within Twitter's control, let's say, same as like YouTube embeds. We've gone through this before, but I mean, that's an argument for the open web, which is something that you are very passionate about. And I think from my perspective, this really indicates the direction of Twitter. It also probably makes a lot of sense why suddenly the edit button is a part of their internal conversation. They're being more public about, oh yeah, okay, you know what, we're working on an edit button, because their dedication to permanence is perhaps not what it used to be. I think the other thing is that this was designed when tweets were 140 characters and that was it. This was that's true.
2011. This was out, and so you could actually express that in a block quote quite straightforwardly. Whereas a tweet now can have entire movies in it, or threads of discussions and polls and things. So there's some value in them decorating it beyond just saying this is from Twitter. But that could imply that the block quote you copy could have a richer version of it in there as well, so that the block quote would show you something, even if if it's sort of beyond the text of the tweet. But that would be a bit more work for them to work out.
Yeah.
But I think the other part of it is. The challenge is that people have, Twitter has encouraged people to use it as a place on the public record. They've been verifying accounts to say this really is this person speaking and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's it.
And done that labeling, and so that's you see tick marks on the quoted tweets and so on. So that is both saying that yes, this was a real tweet and it was said by this person who we've done some effort to say is the person that is there. So they've put their imprimatur on it in that way of saying this is a bit more reliable than a quote on the site. Mm-hmm. And that's fair enough. And that is a useful service. There is some value in them being, this is the unambiguous version of that person posting on Twitter. But when it's been deleted, just taking that away is good. But if they're going to start letting you edit posts, that gets trickier. If other sites that have allowed post editing keep the edit history, and so you can look at that and see what's happened there. And that's important, because otherwise, if you don't have that, you can do all kinds of nasty tricks like completely changing the meaning of a post and then it appearing in a thread of responses to say the opposite of what it said before. And then you can say, look, these people are agreeing with this terrible thing, where in fact they were agreeing with something else that was anodyne that was said earlier. And that's happened a lot. There's lots of cases of that happening in the past, and I'm sure Twitter are thinking about that as they go to think about editable posts. But it's something you need to be very aware of. You need to be able to say, this person was responding to this earlier version of this post,
right? Some sort of trail.
And here's the edit difference and things like that. And it's not,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a solved problem, but it's something other sites have dealt with before and thought about, and showing edit histories. And I'm assuming that Twitter has got a reasonably smart group of people who are thinking about that there. So I think that will probably work okay.
Well, it'll be really interesting to see how this develops. And I think the way that you laid this out, you structured this on your website, has at least called a lot more attention to this idea of this lack of permanence. We have another interview that's coming on the heels of yours, so I do have to kind of cut this short. But I just want to tell everybody, Kevin Marks, you're going to be on This Week in Google this next Wednesday, and I guarantee you this is going to be a big topic of conversation because this continues to be a pretty big issue.
Sure. One thing I would say is that if you are going to quote tweets, send the tweet to Internet Archive and archive.ph as well, so you've then got a separate external record of it existing. And that way you can link to that to say, no, it really did say that. Because otherwise you're in the state of, did it really say that at that time?
Yeah,
so if you've got a site that actually crawls it at that point, which you can trigger both of those to do that, that will be a way to to basically set up a separate third-party arbiter if this was really said.
Some sort of external validation that has a lot more likelihood of persisting long-term. Let's hope so anyways. Yeah. Internet Archive, don't ever go away. Yes. Really want to thank you for carving out some time for us tonight where you are. Kevin Marks, microformats.org or kevinmarks.com is where you can find his blog, his post, his article on this behavior. So Kevin, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week on Twig.
Thank you. See you then.